of our office now. I've now been a part of our office for a couple of years. Prior to my work at the CPO, I was a certified child welfare caseworker in rural Colorado for about 7 years. And then I went on to supervise in-home child abuse prevention programming. Here at the office, I am also a certified mediator. And so I am here to talk about our office, what we do in individual cases, and how we work with the system as a larger whole as well. And so our time this morning, I'll share a little bit about our history, our jurisdiction, our responsibility and role within the system. We'll also talk about how we handle confidentiality and the standards that we are held to. And then we will also talk about our case process, how we work for change, who and when anybody can contact us, and then we'll leave room for questions as well. If you have any questions as they come up through the presentation, feel free to either use the chat or Becca, however you'd like to do that, but there's no need to kind of wait until the end if you have a question. Before we get started, any questions or anything else that anybody's dying to know, and I'll make sure to hit if it's not included in the presentation. Okay, great. So ombudsman. Ombudsman is a Swedish word that means agent or representative of the people. The word itself is gender neutral, and sometimes you will hear ombudsperson or even just shortened to ombuds. They all refer to the same thing. This person or kind of role is designed to help citizens navigate their governments, and it also is there in place to help hold government systems accountable. Child ombudsman offices specifically go by many different names. For example, the office in New Hampshire is called the Office of the Child Advocate. In Colorado, we are called the Office of the Child Protection Ombudsman. Minnesota has an ombudsperson for families. And then Washington has an Office of Family and Children's Ombuds. And while ombuds offices go by a variety of names, we are bound by a singular purpose, and that is to protect children and families in child serving systems. Really, as a starting point, the ombuds profession is well established both in the United States and internationally. These offices exist in both private and public sectors. They oversee a variety of issues, including transportation, prisons, education, hospitals, long-term care, and many others. But today, our focus is on a subset of these offices, and namely Child Protection Ombudsman's offices. So the evolution of child ombudsman's offices can be traced back really for quite a while. They came to be formed in the United States as a result of increased legislation within child welfare and juvenile justice. Really over the last 80 years, this extensive new legislation that's been built to protect children has also initiated the creation of these offices throughout the country. This legislation really recognized for the first time that children needed external protection and support, and in many instances even bestowed certain rights in matters impacting their well-being. So here we can see on this slide back to 1935, specific legislation that started child welfare funding through Social Security. And then of course we see now the biggest piece that everybody is navigating is Families First Prevention Services Act. So what is the impact of this legislation? So really what it did is it created a new political constituency group which is children. Children became, for one of the first times, subject of laws and systems that were designed to serve them. And then when that happened, there became a need to represent children's voices in the public policy sphere to ensure accountability for those systems that were built to serve them. It also created the need for oversight agencies, which includes specialized court systems, guardians ad litem, CASAs, and ombudsman's offices. So the beginning of child protection ombudsman's offices in the United States can be tracked back to the late 1960s. For example, we have legislation and offices that started with the American Bar Association committee, started recommending federal and regional offices. Then we have Hawaii as one of the first who created a general ombudsman within their state. And then we have just these federal efforts end in the mid 90s, and then state efforts begin to start and strengthen. Today, there are nearly 40 child ombudsman offices nationwide. So really what we all really know, especially CASAs in your role, a child's journey through the child welfare system can be very lengthy and arduous. The system is responsible for responding to reports of child abuse and neglect. And through these cases or reports or assessments, a caseworker would investigate a report. The child is considered to be in danger. The child can be removed from their home and placed into either kinship or relative care, and in some cases foster care if it can't be mitigated. Those concerns can't be mitigated by the family. Then we have services are provided so that reunification between the parent and child can be accomplished. And when this cannot safely occur, the child welfare system is then responsible for providing the child a permanent home. And while I've really summarized the very high points of the child welfare system in less than 2 minutes, please be assured that the system is one of the most confusing government systems that families navigate, that anybody navigates really. This slide here is to give you an idea of the many steps that children and families go through just to assess child safety and a family's fitness for care. This is only the first phase that a family must navigate. We'll go into this next slide here, which is all of the steps involved once a child is removed from their family and how reunification, if it is going to take place, will occur. So really, right, the point of these slides is that these are the systems that children and families are embedded in, and the reason why child protection ombudsman's offices are critical to their well-being. One of the biggest missions of our office is system navigation. We really look at any interaction with a client to provide as much education about the system as we can, because it is so difficult for families just to navigate from the start to finish. So back to really why child ombudsman's offices. So one thing we know about the system, both child welfare and juvenile justice systems, is that we have poor outcomes for success. We have those children experience higher rates of homelessness, incarceration, and large-scale bureaucracies are very difficult for citizens to access and can be unresponsive to children and families' needs. Also, despite significant financial investments to the child welfare system, we continue to experience tragedies such as child abuse deaths within the system. So there is a necessity for an independent review of the system and the work and how we can work to do better. Back to the offices in general, National Child Protection Ombudsman's offices vary by jurisdiction. And what this means is that many offices are general jurisdiction serving children. That is our office, Iowa, Hawaii, and Arizona. And then we have what are called single sector jurisdictional offices. For example, in Texas and California, their ombudsman office only serves foster youth. And then in Minnesota, their office serves communities of color. And in Washington, we have child welfare and juvenile justice. Maryland's office serves those in out-of-home placement, and then Delaware serves in a judicial advocacy role. They also vary by office size and budget. Their day-to-day operations vary as well. And one of the most important things that varies is their degree of autonomy from the agencies that they are overseeing. Some agencies are standalone entities and others are housed in the state agencies with various degrees of independence. But we still are bound by that one common goal: improving conditions for children in state care. So I have given a lot of information here. I'll stop and see if there's any questions or kind of comments that we can process through, anything like that.
Amanda, I do have a question here. If I understood you right, this originated out of federal legislation, correct?
Yes, Ombudsman's office is in general. Colorado's office was out of state legislation.
Okay, so, and maybe that answers my question, because I was a little confused if it was federally mandated, why there was such variance, as you explained, in different states as to what they're focusing on. It seemed like there would be a common focus, not just on, just not on communities of color, or just not on kids in foster homes. So it sounds like the state is really where the impetus comes from in this regard. Is that accurate?
Yeah, Bob, that is absolutely accurate. And so really it is what is the state looking to create? How much independence are they going to create through their legislation? That's where the office size and the jurisdiction and the scope, also confidentiality pieces are brought into that legislation as well. In Colorado, I consider us very lucky because we have a wide purview. I'll get into that a little bit later, but we also have our own independent access that came a little bit later. So we are outside of our actual Colorado Department of Human Services. But yes, some offices do sit under other state offices.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other thoughts or questions on that? Okay, great. So really another thing we'll talk about now is ombudsman best practices and standards. So really just like any other field, we have best practices that we like to follow, and any ombudsman's office should follow. And so these are the best practice standards that are designed to ensure that ombudsmen can operate most effectively on behalf of the citizens that we serve. These offices should be independent. This allows them to be free from the entity they oversee, free from outside control and influence. We also are impartial and should be impartial. We receive and review each complaint in an objective and fair manner, free from bias, and treat all of our parties without favor or prejudice. Ombudsman's offices also are confidential. We have the privilege and discretion to keep confidential or release any information related to a complaint or investigation. We also have a credible review process of our complaints. Ombudsmen should be able to perform his or her responsibilities in a manner that engenders respect and confidence and be accessible to all potential complainants. Our offices and ombudsman's offices in general serve as a neutral mediator between citizens and government agencies and are designed to resolve problems at the lowest level. And so really it is about that informal, low-level resolution. We use a lot of mediation and facilitation through our work. And the role of the Child Protection Ombudsman is that we listen to all citizens' concerns. We provide free and confidential services to all of the citizens who contact our office. There are no fees whatsoever associated with contacting our office. We investigate complaints. We have typical independent access to child welfare state databases that can contain most of our child and family records. We also, through our governing statute, have the authority to ask and request additional information that county and human services departments would have access to. We work to determine or to resolve cases at the lowest level possible. This is often through navigation, facilitation, and mediation. Less frequently, we investigate issues that rise to a systemic level and make recommendations for new policy or laws. Some of the benefits of the Child Protection Ombudsman is that we can provide child and family voice to decision makers, and we work to cultivate coordination among child protection agencies. We also serve in a risk management function. The old adage, right, an ounce of medication is worth a pound of cure. We are a less costly way to improve systems. Lawsuits and consent decrees are a very costly way to improve systems. And then also we work to improve outcomes for children and families in state and county systems. All right, and so now we can get into specifically our office here, Colorado's Child Protection Ombudsman's office. So
Amanda, we have a quick question in the chat. Do you have to be notified to get involved, or is there an audit process where you review systems?
Great question. We, at our office, we do not have the authority to self-initiate complaints. So we must receive a call or a contact from someone to investigate or review any kind of complaint. Did that answer that, Becca?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Susie, so yeah, oftentimes, right, we can hear things in the news or see things in the news, and we can't do anything until we get a complaint. So, you know, we just don't have that authority at this time. So our office,
does that complaint have to come from the GAL or the caseworker, or can it come directly
from anybody, Bob? Yeah, anybody. Anyone with any concern about Colorado's child protection system as a whole can make a complaint to our office. That means a neighbor, an advocate, a relative, an educator, law enforcement, a service provider within the system, a CASA, GAL, anyone can contact our office.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So our office was initially established in 2010. At that time, the office was created as a response to increased public desire for oversight and accountability of the child protection system. The office existed as a contracted program through a local nonprofit and was managed by the Colorado Department of Human Services. In 2015, new legislation was signed into law that allowed the office to become independent from the CDHS. And the original program was then transformed into an independent state agency. And as that independent state agency, it is housed in the judicial branch of the state government. And that is still how we are housed, which is under state government judicial branch. This legislation also created the Colorado Child Protection Ombudsman Board. And that's a board. Our board is still in place. We have bi-monthly public meetings as well. And our current ombudsman, Stephanie Villafuerte, took office in January of 2016. We currently are an office of about 8 people, and we are growing. Really, it seems like every day. And so any questions about that independence or our journey to where we are today? Great. So I'll talk a little bit about our jurisdiction now. And this is where I spoke a little bit earlier about our purview. So we provide oversight to Colorado's child protection system, which is not solely child welfare. So we are charged with receiving public complaints concerning child protective services on behalf of a child regarding any action, inaction, or decision of any public agency or provider that receives public monies, and that those actions may have adversely affected the safety, permanency, or well-being of a child. And so I'll go to this really quickly. So this is this little web we have here. So our purview really does encompass child welfare, of course, the Division of Youth Services, but also medical providers, daycare providers, the education system, law enforcement, and public health as well. And then what we are not authorized to do and cannot be directed to or intervene in any civil, criminal, or judicial proceedings and or interfere in a criminal investigation. We also don't have jurisdiction over attorneys, guardians ad litem, magistrates, or judges. And so we are able to help take those calls and offer resource navigation and referrals to those offices that are able to resolve those complaints. We just cannot review those allegations or complaints solely within our office. Any questions there? Great. And so I'll give a little bit, I want to just give some kind of tangible examples of what this purview looks like. And so we've had cases where a client was concerned about how a school handled a disciplinary issue with a special needs student. This case also involved law enforcement and concerns regarding their response to the discipline as well. We've had other cases from involving child welfare where clients have been concerned that a county department was keeping children or a child in foster care despite having relative placement options available. And then we have received concern or complaint from the Division of Youth Services concerning how staff handled youth who was actively self-harming. And then I will go into more specifics about how these individual cases played out shortly. So our office, like I said a little bit ago, acts as our independent and neutral problem solver. We are charged with helping citizens navigate the complex child protection system and educating stakeholders and the community. We offer those free and confidential services. We objectively research and investigate concerns. We work to illuminate systems within the child protection system. And then we make recommendations for child protection system improvement. And while we may take complaints, that is not all we do. We can help bridge the gap with communication and or education between parties in many cases. And now to speak a little bit about confidentiality. So our office, we are held to the same confidentiality standards as the county and state human services departments. And so these are those confidentiality statutes that we are bound by. And then in regards to protecting our clients' information, we also do not release the identity of our contact or client unless they explicitly give us permission to do so. And the only other exception to both of these is if the client makes a statement that they're going to harm themselves or someone else, we will release their identity to the authorities. And that is a disclosure that we go over through the intake process with everybody, so they are aware of that at that time as well. We are also mandated reporters of child abuse and neglect as well. So an example of how this can be utilized in real life is we may ask clients to sign a release of information to secure additional documents and information that is needed to address a complaint. And then we also, any documents we obtain through a part of our case remain confidential, and we will not release anything to another person or agency. So for example, trails documentation, we don't own that documentation, so we are not legally allowed to distribute it to anybody. So we would just refer, if somebody is looking for that information, we would refer back to either the county or the state department for those records. Here we go. Every call to the CPO drives systemic change. So we have individual cases that we work, but we also utilize all of the information obtained in these cases to better understand what is going on in the system for children and families, and what is working well and what may need improvement. So we hear from advocates concerning decision-making, and that could look like questions about placement, visitation, or the educational processes that are involved. We also hear from youth. We often hear from youth in placement, and that could be the Division of Youth Services or foster care, about living conditions, how they can be more involved in their case, questions about placements, and many times how do they have access to their families or visits with their families. We also hear from parents about services and communication, how things are, done equitably in their cases, and often about the legal process as a whole. Through our individual case process, this is really started by a call to our office and any contact to our office. And so we have the ability to take online complaints 24/7. And then our office main line is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And so when we get these calls, those calls are then assigned to an analyst. We have 4 analysts within our office, and we complete an intake call. We make our first attempt within 2 business days. And we then speak with the client about whatever their concerns may be, what they're looking for support with, what agencies involved, and really what they feel has gone wrong. And we then independently review those allegations or concerns. Oftentimes that is a review of court documentation or child welfare records, or even information or documentation that clients have provided just to our office. So we independently review all of those concerns. We work to resolve those concerns, like I said a little while ago, at the lowest level possible. Sometimes that means we have a conversation with the county or the state department to clarify what has gone on in a specific case. If we identify concern about maybe rule interpretation, we can ask for clarification there as well. And really what is, I think, a benefit to our office is that our casework, our complaints drive our casework. And so the outcomes really do vary and are unique based on the individual client's complaint. And we can then use the information learned in the individual case and then work that up to our larger systemic work. In the most recent fiscal year, we handled 725 cases. And our numbers just continue to grow, which is, it's exciting to see that we are growing and that people are utilizing our office. Back to those previous examples that I had spoken about, the case involving the school and law enforcement, we were able to speak with the superintendent about the incident. We also learned about how teachers were trained in this incident and what they will be doing moving forward. And then the analyst also spoke with law enforcement about their reasoning behind the decisions that they made as well. In the case involving child welfare, regarding the kinship and relative placements, we had a meeting with the County Human Services Department around what progress was being made towards relative placement. We learned that there had been barriers that the county acknowledged in working through some issues with the relative, and we encouraged them to communicate this to the family and ensure that transparent and timely communication was happening. And then in the Division of Youth Services case, we spoke to the county department. We also spoke to the youth center, and we spoke to the youth to learn about the process that was utilized in that case. And then that specific case we developed a written product. We actually developed a blog that discussed his experience within the system and possible system gaps. The CPO works to resolve complaint concerns at the lowest level possible. This can include facilitating communication between parties and providing education and resources. Approximately 20% of our cases result in letters of CPO concern. These letters are generated from the CPO's independent review of cases and are formal letters sent to the County Human Services Agency and then the supervising entity, the Colorado Department of Human Services. These letters often result in meaningful change, not only for individual cases, but also help county and human services departments recognize those potential shortfalls in training and policy implementation. For stakeholders, these letters also serve to inform them of what is happening in their county. We also produce what we call issue briefs that highlight key topics identified through our work. This can include and has included DYS, Division of Youth Services rulemaking, how COVID-19 impacted child welfare as first responders. And we also participate in many committee meetings. We consider ourselves a stakeholder and try to participate in any relevant work there. In particular, we participate in the Child Fatality Review Team, sometimes referred to as CFRT, Juvenile Justice Reform Committee, and then the Fatality Review within the Department of Public Health and Environment. And then we also sit in with the DYS DCW Crossover Youth Task Force. We're also currently working on a project with the goal of enhancing how youth are notified of and how they understand their rights and protections while in foster care. You as CASAs, are aware that we have legislation in Colorado that discussed protections for youth in foster care, really outlined kind of their rights that they have while in foster care. And then within the last couple of years, it was enhanced to become specifically about sibling rights, sibling visits. And so we are working on something that follows that a little bit closer, and that will be coming out in the next few months. We also rolled out a youth-focused page on our website, and we have a youth-specific complaint form as well on our website. And we are working on expanding our direct youth engagement and how best to do that in a very meaningful way. And as always, we continue to work and recommend public policies that support and improve the child protection system. And in some cases, we investigate larger systemic concerns, issue recommendations, and then monitor progress on those recommendations on an ongoing basis. An example of this is our work on the adoption assistance legislation over the last 3 years. Right, and how anybody could contact us. So like I said, we have a 24/7 web-based complaint form that is available to anyone. We also have our main line here, 720-625-8640. That is manned by staff, but also a voicemail is there, and we return those messages within the 2 business days as well, if it does happen to go to a message. Another thing that we also have to update people who are interested is we have a newsletter, and you can access our newsletter sign up through our website as well. We have an office downtown, but currently for about the last year have been working remotely. And so we are really utilizing video meetings, virtual sessions, and phone calls in a really great way right now. And then I wanted to leave some space for any questions that you guys may have.
So Amanda?
Yeah.
Where can I find, I'm not sure I know what the rights for kiddos in foster care and siblings rights, where would I find that information?
Yeah, Susie, it's a great question. It is, let me see. I will find it's a House bill. I will find it and I will send it. Becca, can I send it to you after this training and you can disperse it?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a list. I want to say there's over 30. They call them protections is what they're referred to in the law, right? Free of abuse. They're free to contact their caseworker. They're free to contact the ombudsman's office, actually, and the State Department of Human Services when things are not going well. And then specifically the newest set of those that law and rule has been promulgated for those is access to their siblings and kind of guidelines for how sibling visits are to be established and maintained. And so absolutely, Susie, I will send that over. I'll also send a reference to the volume 7 rules specific to the sibling visits. Those are newer rules. And so I'll provide that reference as well.
Great, thank you very much.
Of course. Any other questions or thoughts? I'm also curious about, you know, from anybody really, what are you guys seeing? Where could you see our office supporting your work?
For me, just being aware that you're there
Yeah,
is really helpful because it's not a well-known division, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, we are all, like I said, we are always here. You know, and I think one thing too, just to kind of put a finer point on, you know, we hear a lot from parents and, you know, those people who are kind of, directly impacted by the child welfare system. But we do hear from legal professionals, medical professionals, really very, very kind of wide range of professionals involved with cases. And that can either be, hey, this is what this is happening in a case. is this right? Are we interpreting the rule right? Maybe, can you look at this for us? Or, I don't think that this is happening correctly, or something doesn't feel right. You can also remain as an anonymous client. And so, if there's ever any fear about that as well, we have that ability as well.
Amanda,
So-
we had a question about must contacts or complaints pertain to a specific case, or can they be generally system related?
Yeah, they can absolutely be generally system related. Sometimes, right, especially you guys have this great seat within the jurisdiction. And so you can often see maybe trends or patterns happening within a certain set of cases, maybe a certain set of people, and those complaints can be made to our office as well. Case specific details do help us, but because like I said earlier, each case can be just very specific. We have the opportunity to review those, regardless of really what, if it's one person being impacted, if it's anything, right? It can be really anything that you feel is a concern.
So Amanda, I don't know how else to say this, but how, like, are you advertised? Like,
Yeah.
how do parents find out about you? How do, kids, and how do we find out that this is out there?
Yeah, it's a great question, Susie. And so, I mean, Google is one of those beautiful things. That's how a lot of people find us. We are, I don't want to say marketed, but we are noticed on the Colorado Department of Human Services website in several places, especially on the child welfare complaints page. We're noted there. We're also noted on each of the Division of Youth Services, youth center pages. We last year started a campaign or an outreach, and we posted posters within Division of Youth Services facilities to better explain to youth how they could access our offices. But that is absolutely kind of ongoing work that we're doing in explaining what we do, letting people know that we're available. Yeah, so that, I mean, it's an ongoing process for sure, Susie.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Are there any
Amanda,
other questions for me? Oh, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, does you do work with young people that are emancipated, or they're just, I'm thinking of kids just coming out of the foster care system, kind of out there on their own. Is this the kind of thing that would make sense to refer them to you?
Yeah, we certainly can help if they had, concerns about, they can either share their experience in foster care. If they are needing resources at the time, we can certainly help with that resource navigation as well. Connect with services in their area. Absolutely, that is definitely something that we can do.
Great. At this point, I'm going to stop recording. Doesn't mean we have to stop the meeting.